Onrapale a apanet.ks varivek, Sanzorn. Mahamarink, The 1001 Nights, c. 850. c. 1500. Collection, New York. The Granger. Frontispiece by Edmund Dulac, from Sindbad the Sailor and Other Stories. Ver, since the writer, Antoine Galland. Nights, or the Arabian Nights, entertainments, into French in the early 18th century. This collection of tales has been the best known and most widely read work of Arabic literature in the West. The often fantastic adventures of the characters Ali Baba, Aladdin, and Sindbad are known throughout the world today. The 1001 Nights probably developed over several centuries. The original stories came from many oral and written sources, including such collections as the Indian Panchatantra, see page 478, and tales brought by travelers from China, India, and every part of the Middle East. Scholars have identified sources for many of the stories, but the true origins of many others remain unknown because they exist in more than one version and in more than one language. The earliest references to the 1001 Nights appear in manuscripts from as early as the 9th century AD, kept alive by Arab storytellers throughout the Middle Ages. The collection grew and changed. By the mid-16th century, the stories had been put into the form we know today by an unknown Egyptian compiler. The group of tales was first published in Arabic in 1548. The tales in the collection are loosely held together by an element that was common in medieval literature: a frame story. In the frame story, a sultan, Shahryar, is enraged at his wife's unfaithfulness and orders her executed. He then takes a new wife each day, but has her killed at dawn the next day, because he believes that no woman can ever be faithful. The supply of potential wives is running low when the Sultan takes Scheherazade, Herzad, as his wife. Scheherazade is a spellbinding storyteller. Each night, she entertains the Sultan with a new tale, but delays revealing the ending until the following night. The captivated Sultan keeps postponing her execution in order to hear the stories. After 1001 Nights of Tales, he abandons his plans to kill Scheherazade, and the couple remains happily married. From the third voyage of Sindbad the Sailor from the 1001 Nights. Background. Sindbad, one of the heroes in the 1001 Nights, is a rich young man from Baghdad, now the capital of Iraq, who becomes a sea merchant after recklessly spending all of his wealth. Sindbad's marvelous adventures during the several voyages he makes to regain his fortune are the subject of this story cycle. The stories of Sindbad the Sailor are almost certainly Arabic in origin, but no one knows from which part of the Arab world they come. Some scholars believe that the tales originated in Baghdad. Others argue persuasively that the stories originated in Oman, a country on the southeast coast of the Arabian Peninsula, and became associated with Baghdad only later. Every seafaring culture, ancient Greece, medieval Arabia, and post-Renaissance Europe, to name a few, has produced imaginative literature about adventures at sea. In seafaring literature, the voyage becomes an opportunity to show courage and ambition. The shipwreck is a symbol of ultimate misfortune and loneliness, and the threatening monster represents the universal fear of the unknown. Writer's response. Even if you have never read a Sindbad story before, you might know something about Sindbad and his adventures, or about other seafaring adventure stories such as Treasure Island or Robinson Crusoe. Write down some of the words, phrases, and images that you associate with such stories. What do you predict will be some of the features of the story you are about to read? Literary focus. Most plots follow the same basic pattern. They begin with a situation in which there is a conflict or a problem that the characters have to solve. As they try to solve the problem, the characters encounter a series of complications that usually make their problem worse. This part of the plot is called the rising action. The rising action builds to a high point, which is called the climax. After the climax comes the resolution, the part of the plot in which the problem is finally resolved. From the third voyage of Sindbad, the sailor, from the 1001 Nights, translated by N.J. Dawood. Who is narrating this story? List everything you learn about the narrator in the first paragraph, then read on to the end of the third paragraph. How do you predict the narrator will respond to the dangerous situation in which he finds himself? LLR. Know, my friends, that for some time after my return, I continued to lead a happy and tranquil life. But I soon grew weary of my idle existence in Baghdad, and once again longed to roam the world in quest of profit and adventure, unmindful of the dangers of ambition and worldly greed. I resolved to set out on another voyage. I provided myself with a great store of goods, and, after taking them down the Tigris, set sail from Basra together with a band of honest merchants. The voyage began prosperously. We called at many foreign ports, trading profitably with our merchandise. One day, however, whilst we were sailing in mid-ocean, we heard the captain of our ship, who was on deck scanning the horizon, suddenly burst out in a loud lament. He beat himself about the face, tore his beard, and rent his clothes. "We are lost," he cried, as we crowded round him. "The treacherous wind has driven us off our course towards that island, which you see before you. It is the Isle of the Zub, where dwell a race of dwarfs, more akin to apes than men, from whom no voyager has ever escaped alive." Scarcely had he uttered these words when a multitude of ape-like savages appeared on the beach and began to swim out towards the ship. In a few moments, they were upon us, thick as a swarm of locusts. Barely 4 spans in height, they were the ugliest of living creatures, with little gleaming yellow eyes and bodies thickly covered with black fur. And so numerous were they that we did not dare to provoke them or attempt to drive them away, lest they should set upon us and kill us to a man by force of numbers. They scrambled up the masts, gnawing the cables with their teeth and biting them to shreds. Then they seized the helm and steered the vessel to their island. When the ship had run ashore, the dwarfs carried us one by one to the beach, and promptly pushing off again, climbed on board and sailed away. Disconsolately, we set out to search for food and water, and by good fortune came upon some fruit trees and a running stream. Here we refreshed ourselves, and then wandered about the island until at length we saw far off among the trees a massive building, where we hoped to pass the night in safety. Drawing nearer, we found that it was a towering palace surrounded by a lofty wall, with a great ebony door which stood wide open. We entered the spacious courtyard, and to our surprise found it deserted. In one corner lay a great heap of bones, and on the far side we saw a broad bench, an open oven, pots and pans of enormous size, and many iron spits for roasting. Exhausted and sick at heart, we lay down in the courtyard and were soon overcome by sleep. At sunset, we were awakened by a noise like thunder. The earth shook beneath our feet, and we saw a colossal black giant approaching from the doorway. He was a fearsome sight, tall as a palm tree, with red eyes burning in his head like coals of fire. His mouth was a dark well, with lips that drooped like a camel's loosely over his chest, whilst his ears, like a pair of large round discs, hung back over his shoulders. His fangs were as long as the tusks of a boar, and his nails were like the claws of a lion. The sight of this monster struck terror to our hearts. We cowered motionless on the ground as we watched him stride across the yard and sit down on the bench. For a few moments he eyed us one by one in silence. Then he rose and, reaching out towards me, lifted me up by the neck and began feeling my body as a butcher would a lamb. Finding me little more than skin and bone, however, he flung me to the ground and, picking up each of my companions in turn, pinched and prodded them and set them down until at last he came to the captain. Now the captain was a corpulent fellow, tall and broad-shouldered. The giant seemed to like him well. He gripped him as a butcher grips a fatted ram and broke his neck under his foot. Then he thrust an iron spit through his body from mouth to backside, and lighting a great fire in the oven, carefully turned his victim round and round before it. When the flesh was finely roasted, the ogre tore the body to pieces with his fingernails as though it were a pullet, and devoured it limb by limb, gnawing the bones and flinging them against the wall. The monster then stretched himself out on the bench and soon fell fast asleep. His snores were as loud as the grunts and gurgles that issue from the throat of a slaughtered beast. Thus he slept all night, and when Meeming came, he rose and went out of the palace, leaving us half crazed with terror. As soon as we were certain that the monster had gone, we began lamenting our evil fortune. Would that we had been drowned in the sea or killed by the apest, we cried. That would surely have been better than the foul death which now awaits us. But that which Allah has ordained must surely come to pass. We left the palace to search for some hiding place, but could find no shelter in any part of the island, and had no choice but to return to the palace in the evening. Night came, and with it the black glant, announcing his approach by a noise like thunder. No sooner had he entered than he snatched up one of the merchants and prepared his supper in the same way as the night before. Then, stretching himself out to sleep, he snored the night away. Next morning, when the giant had gone, we discussed our desperate plight. "By Allah," cried one of the merchants, "let us rather throw ourselves into the sea than remain alive to be roasted and eaten." "Listen, my friends," sawed another. "We must kill this monster, for only by destroying him can we end his wickedness and save good Muslims from his barbarous cruelty." This proposal was received with general approbation, so I rose in my turn and addressed the company. "If we are all agreed to kill this monster," I said, "let us first build a raft on which we can escape from this island as soon as we have sent his soul to damnation. Perchance our raft will take us to some other island, where we can board a ship bound for our country. If we are drowned, we shall at least escape roasting and die a martyr's death." "By Allah," cried the others, "that is a wise plan," setting to work at once. We hauled several logs from the great pile of wood stacked beside the oven and carried them out of the palace. Then we fastened them together into a raft, which we left ready on the seashore. In the evening, the earth shook beneath our feet as the black glant burst in upon us. Barking and snarling like a mad dog once more, he seized upon the stoutest of my companions and prepared his meal. When he had eaten his fill, he stretched himself upon the bench, as was his custom, and so seen, fell fast asleep. Noiselessly, we now rose, took 2 of the great iron spits from the oven, and thrust them into the fire. As soon as they were red hot, we carried them over to the soaking monster and plunged their sharpened ends deep into his eyes, exerting our united weight from above to push them home. The giant gave a deafening shriek, which filled our hearts with terror and cast us back on the ground many yards away. Totally blinded, he leapt up from the bench, groping for us with outstretched hands, while we nimbly dodged his frantic clutches. In despair, he felt his way to the ebony door, and TCNJ Le Gaude was one of the greatest pointers of 19th century Spain and indeed of Europe. O these goys. Colossus match your O image af the giant in this tale. Why why not? Staggered out of the yard, groaning in agonies of pain. Without losing a moment, we made off towards the beach. As soon as we reached the water, we launched our raft and jumped aboard, but scarcely had we rowed a few yards when we saw the blind savage running towards us, guided by a foul hag of his own kind. On reaching the shore, they stood howling threats and curses at us for a while, and then caught up massive boulders and hurled them at our raft with stupendous force. Missile followed missile until all my companions, save 2, were drowned. But we 3 who escaped soon contrived to paddle beyond the range of their fury.